A new study shows that as many as 500,000 people are dying every year from Alzheimer's. That figure has been suppressed for years. Now it's coming out. This tragic, that's the greatest killer in our society. Secondly, it looks like the Russians are engineering a vote to make the Crimea a part of Russia. We'll tell you about that later on. And the question is, how much hurt can the Environmental Protection Agency do to our society? It's been called the war on coal. The EPA is putting out strict regulations in the fight against what they call global warming, even though some members of Congress say these rules are job killers.
Well, some economists warn it could also be a war on manufacturing and other businesses, too, and it could drive up your utility bills. Paul Strand has the story from Washington.
The Environmental Protection Agency decided in late 2009 that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, and therefore the agency could regulate it under the Clean Air Act. The Supreme Court backed this controversial idea, and that set the EPA loose to impose numerous regulations on important industries. For instance, it's come out with regulations so strict on new coal plants, some in Congress say it amounts to a war on coal.
This war on coal is going to cost thousands of jobs, those that work in the mining industry, as well as those that are dependent upon the affordable, reliable electricity that coal provides.
Is the EPA the Environmental Protection Agency, or does it really stand for the Employment Prevention Agency?
Coal gives America 40% of its electricity. Hobbling it is sure to mean higher energy prices.
It is fundamentally immoral for the federal government to put hard-working, middle-class American families into economic distress. And that is exactly what this war on coal does.
Let's talk about our senior citizens on fixed incomes. If these regulations go forth, it is going to be impossible for them to cool their homes in the summer and heat them in the winter.
So if you want to take low-income working moms and dads, single parents, and make their lives more miserable, more difficult, make their paychecks go less far, these are the regulations that will do it.
But the EPA and its allies warn unfettered global warming will destroy crops, unleash numerous superstorms even worse than Sandy, and be much more devastating to the economy. Still, some lawmakers say there's a deeper issue, that rule by regulation from the presidential administration, rather than legislation from Congress, is also dangerous for democracy.
When we separated powers, Montesquieu said if you let the executive legislate, there'll be a type of a tyranny. This is a type of a tyranny. We will fight it, not just because it's bad for jobs and bad for coal, but because it goes against everything we stand for.
Many say the boom in cleaner natural gas means it can replace coal. And some in the natural gas industry who put big money into this war on coal are cheering now.
And the natural gas industry thought they were very clever. We've kneecapped coal. Now everything will switch to natural gas and we'll make a fortune.
Phil Kerpen, author of Democracy Denied.
Well, the Sierra Club has since announced the sequel to their Beyond Coal campaign. It's called Beyond Natural Gas. And now they're saying they will sue to stop every single natural gas plant from being sited in this country.
When President Obama got elected, he campaigned on a plan that said under my plan, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. His former Secretary of Energy said he'd like to see European-style gasoline prices. Recently, a chief advisor said that a war on coal is exactly what we need.
And we're going to continue fighting in a bipartisan way to block the Obama administration's attempt at not only this war on coal, but a war on all American energy.
A major reason Congress hasn't fought much against global warming is there's no consensus in Congress on how much man can really fight the threat or even how real it is. But the EPA believes wholeheartedly in that threat, which Kerpen thinks is amazing as it's all based on computer projections that may not be right.
And the idea that we're going to make people suffer, make them pay higher energy bills every single month because of a computer model that could be totally wrong, claims there's a benefit 300 years from now. It's a crazy way to do business, and you know these models get changed all the time. The next version of them could say something totally different.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
It's a horrible prospect, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen, to have a group of zealots running your country with no practical experience at all, never run a business, have no conception of what they're doing, and yet they parrot all this nonsense about we're going to help the little guy, while they're putting the little guy out of work, running up their cost of living, And they say, well, we're for the little guy and we're against these big guys. Well, are they? It looks like, if you look at the way President Obama lives, look at what he does. Look at the cost of that airplane he flies around in. There's a whole fleet of them. Look at the huge automobiles he drives in. Look at the staff that mans that palace he lives in. You talk about the little guy, he isn't found in the Obama household. But once again, Congress is facing a stonewall in its investigation into the IRS Tea Party scandal. John Jessup has this story from Washington. Here's John.
Pat, some Republicans in Congress are considering holding former IRS official Lois Lerner in contempt after she again refused to answer questions in a hearing on the IRS Tea Party scandal. After being sworn in, House Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa repeatedly asked Lerner about her involvement in the scandal, but Lerner time and again invoked the Fifth Amendment, much like she did last May when she appeared before the panel.
In February of 2014, President Obama stated that there was not a smidgen of corruption in the IRS targeting. Ms. Lerner, do you believe that there is not a smidgen of corruption in the IRS targeting of conservatives?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Jay Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice says Lerner's refusal to answer any question shows that Obama officials aren't cooperating in the investigation. Pat?
Well, they sure aren't cooperating. You know, here's the deal. Congress can say, okay, Ms. Lerner, we will grant you a blanket exemption of what you say, we will not prosecute you. And once she has such an exemption, the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply. And that's what they need to do. So they say, we will not prosecute you on anything that you say during these hearings. We give you a blanket immunity. Once she has it, why do you need a prohibition against self-incrimination? But what is it going on that they're trying to hide? I mean, it looks more and more and more suspicious. And I think the American people deserve an answer. There's something, I mean, I don't even know if they fired her. I think they may have allowed her to go on leave. They're still getting their salary. I mean, it's ridiculous, the games that these people are playing, and they've obviously done something wrong, and they're trying to cover for the president. Well, this harkens back to the scandal that went on in the Nixon administration. He wound up being impeached by Congress and having to resign. I mean, they were threatening to impeach him. They didn't do it. But he did resign. And it seems like Obama's getting away with it. John?
Pat, turning overseas, the Parliament of Crimea voted unanimously today to leave Ukraine and join Russia. The Crimean government also announced that it will hold a referendum on March 16th to put the vote to the public on whether to join Russia. Some people in Crimea believe they should remain right where they are.
I think we have to stay with Ukraine, not separating, not go to Russia.
Crimea's move comes as diplomats are looking for a way to end the crisis in Ukraine. And here in Washington, Congress is considering stiff sanctions on Russia for sending troops into Crimea. Well, the Israeli Navy intercepted a weapons shipment Wednesday on its way to terrorist groups, including long-range rockets. The weapons came from Iran, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it's yet more evidence that Iran is still a major threat. Chris Mitchell has this story from Jerusalem.
Israeli defense officials said they tracked the shipment for months.
Over the last months, the Israeli intelligence has continued to gather extensively in order to intercept this mission that Iran was trying to carry out.
The shipment included dozens of M302 missiles with a range of between 60 and 120 miles. Those strategic weapons would have put millions of Israelis and cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem within rocket range and represented a new level of danger to Israel's home front. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the weapons shipment reveals the true face of Iran.
Iran is smiling, talking soft in the international forums, but it continues unabatedly its aggressive behavior in the Middle East and beyond. It's sending the deadliest weapons to the most cruel terrorist groups and despots like the Assad regime. It has not changed one iota its aggressive policies. I think it's critically important to prevent this terrorist regime from having the weapons of mass death. This regime must not be allowed to have nuclear weapons capability.
The seizure lifts the veil on the ongoing daily covert war between Israel and its enemies, what Israel's Chief of Staff Benny Gantz calls the war between wars. The IDF released a video tracing the route of the missiles from Syria to Iran, onto a civilian ship at an Iranian port, and then into the Red Sea, where Israeli naval forces intercepted it hundreds of miles away from Israel. Some analysts call the seizure the biggest arms shipment in more than a decade. The ship is under tow now and expected to arrive into the Israeli port of Eilat over the weekend. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Pat, this was a major find for the Israeli military.
Well, it's so important. If you've ever been there, you know along the coastal region, when you give these weapons of this range, over 300 miles, to Hamas, and they're located in the Gaza Strip, that means Tel Aviv is within range, but all the oil refineries of Israel along the coast, the electric power plants of Israel along the coast, all that infrastructure is within range of these deadly missiles. Now, I don't quite understand how they started in Syria, went to Iran, then took that circuitous route all around into the Red Sea, but that's the way they went. And the fingers being pointed at Iran. And ladies and gentlemen, sooner or later, Israel is going to have to take action. It cannot sit idly by and allow itself to be destroyed by a country that has set as its announced goal the destruction of the Jewish people and the annihilation of the state of Israel. And it's time the United States State Department get his hands off and give freedom to the Israelis to do what they've got to do. They have to do it. It's self-defense. They have to defend themselves. And Bibi Netanyahu knows that his job is to defend his people, not be nice to Barack Obama. John?
Pat, here at home, far more people may be dying from Alzheimer's disease than previously reported. Nearly 85,000 people died from Alzheimer's in 2010, according to the Centers for Disease Control. But that number should really be closer to more than 500,000, according to a study from Rush University Medical Center in Chicago. That would make Alzheimer's the third leading cause of death in the U.S., not far behind heart disease, which is number one with nearly 600,000 deaths, and cancer with 575,000. Pat?
Thank you so much. You know, Alzheimer's is an awful thing.
It really
is. It's
is.
awful. And have you ever had a relative or anybody have Alzheimer's?
Beginning stages,
Maybe.
a little bit, some, but more dementia, which is a little different.
I never have. We have people that live long lives, but to my knowledge, we don't have that, so it may be genetic in part. But it is death. The people who have it are just like dead. And now what this says is, once there's an onset diagnosed as Alzheimer's, they have between up to 5 years and they're dead. Because the same processes that slow down the thinking also slow down the critical functions in the body, and you know, they die.
So hard to watch that happen to a loved one.
Well, many old people stop eating, and they say, well, it's malnutrition, and they caught some other disease, but it's not malnutrition. It is the onset of some kind of senile dementia. But ladies and gentlemen, we don't spend that much money trying to figure out what the cause of this stuff is. They've thought, well, maybe we can find amyloid plaques. We found this, and each time they think they're getting an answer, then they come up short on it. But it's one of those terrible, terrible things. It is a living hell. The people are dead. The ones that you love so much aren't there anymore. They don't know who you are. They don't know who they are. They don't recognize anything.
And it's scary to them. I mean, they see things and they don't, recognize their surrounding. It's a frightening thing for an elderly person.
Think how it breaks the heart of somebody who loves them, and there's nothing they can do. I mean, it's just a terrible thing, and it's time that society start spending some money. We waste money on so many things, and if there was ever anything we could spend research dollars on, it's on trying to figure out what causes the senile dementia, what causes Alzheimer's, and we've got a whole lot of baby boomers who are going to be moving past 65 into the retirement age. And when that happens, the numbers of people dying from this dread scourge is going to get a lot higher than 500,000. John?
Pat, in other health news, people are eating too much sugar and need to cut back. That's the word from the World Health Organization. The WHO's expert panel is recommending your daily sugar intake should be just 5% of your total calories. That's half of what the agency had previously suggested, and it includes sugars added into foods, along with those in honey, syrup, and fruit juices. The panel says cutting back on sugar would fight cavities and obesity. And of course, Pat, obesity ties into numerous other diseases like diabetes, heart problems, and more.
I'm glad the FDA is watching this program and beginning to get the word we've been putting out for years about the dangers of sugar, of what it does to you. But they've got something they call metabolic syndrome. It's just not, oh, you've got metabolic syndrome. That's a big deal. What is it? Well, it means your cells are all screwed up. And you have inflammation. And inflammation is the cause of disease. And where do you get inflammation? It is from sugar. It is from white bread, white rice, processed pasta, and all kinds of sugar. And we find the high fructose corn syrup has been put into almost everything. It's into baby food. It's certainly into the drinks. And when you look at the amount of sugar that you find in one 12-ounce can of Coke or Pepsi, it is alarming. And if people knock off 2 or 3 of those a day, they are killing themselves. So we have a rash of type 2 diabetes. Those that have type 1, it gets exacerbated. I mean, it's a very, very serious thing. So we're telling you things, folks, that are really significant, and it's a worry. So you cut back, but I tell you how you cut back. You've got to read the labels. You cannot go into stores and say, well, I want sugar pops. I want, honey bunches of oats or whatever those things are. I'm not going to take that.
I think people are doing their homework a little bit more as more and more of this information comes out. It seems to have taken years to have really been able to nail what sugar is in. It comes under many headings, as you know.
Well, it's in all processed white flour because the white flour turns into sugar along with the sugar. But you read the sugars. It's on the labels. It's there. Hey, there are only 2 or 3 of them. Oatmeal doesn't have sugar. Oat bran doesn't have sugar. I think all bran doesn't have sugar. Bran fakes generally don't. And then you've got, brown rice, and you have things like that. But you've got fresh leafy vegetables. You've got natural fruit. You got sugar and fruit, but that's okay.
Close to the way God made it, right?
Amen. Go out and plant an apple tree and eat thereof.
Members of Congress are speaking out for persecuted Christians. 2 Republicans gave Ash Wednesday speeches condemning widespread attacks against Christians in the Middle East. Alabama Congressman Bradley Burns said the U.S. should condition aid to other countries like Egypt and Iraq on their treatment of religious minorities. Frank Wolf of Virginia asked American Christians to show more support for suffering believers around the world. Well, 2 more abortion clinics in Texas are closing. Both failed to comply with a new anti-abortion law that passed last summer. The new law requires doctors performing abortions to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital. The number of abortion clinics in Texas has dropped by more than half since the state began passing new restrictions on abortion in 2011. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.